Now, I'm sure many of you, and rightfully so, spent the weekend celebrating. I too, even I took a moment to let a near miss on a full communist takeover actually sink in and celebrate some. But, folks, the election is still not over. They couldn't believably stop Donald Trump at the ballot box, so now they're trying to block 47 from having a cooperative Congress. A dozen and a half or so congressional races remain uncalled, 8 of those being in California alone. That also includes seats in states like Ohio, Alaska, Iowa, and of course, the problem child, Arizona, where ballots just continue to seemingly appear out of nowhere. Take, for example, Pima County, Arizona, where obvious fraud is taking place. Pima County added 14,666 ballots to its total of uncounted ballots on November the 8th. And it's not just Pima County, according to our friend Liz Harrington. She tweeted out that outstanding votes almost doubled from 11,700 to 11,800 in Yuma County, Arizona, going from about 9,800 votes left to over 18,000 votes remaining. Numbers in Arizona just don't add up in general. For instance, Arizona had a total of 463,000 voters without a gender, of which 351,000 returned ballots. Maricopa, we haven't actually talked much about Maricopa, had 292,000, of which 200,000 returned a ballot. Pima had 60,000, of which 108,000 returned a ballot. So if you try to total it up, that's 178% return rate. And the Trump-endorsed candidate, Carrie Lake, garnered nearly 140,000 less votes than the top of the ticket, Donald Trump, in what is a landslide year. In fact, they want us all to believe that Trump overwhelmingly won the presidency in multiple states, as you see here, but that voters chose to send, in many cases, like the Arizona Senate seat, far, far left Democrats to the Senate. And if you believe that, well, I have some oceanfront property in Arizona for you. And join us now to discuss further the mechanics of the down ballot steal and what it means is professor himself and former attorney, Mr. David Clements. Professor Clements, look, so many people were so excited about a Trump win, they've stopped paying attention. It wasn't, maybe for Donald Trump, you could say it was too big to rig. It wasn't feasible or to optically pull it off and have anyone to believe it. But they've just now moved down ballot, is what it looks like to me and others I've spoken to.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the thing that I'm wrestling with and how to make sense of it all is there's a difference between the truth and a narrative. And your show is called The Absolute Truth. And I actually I align with your messaging quite a bit, Emerald, on the system infrastructure. Why is it that certain states seem to have a technological obstacle that allowed Trump to get through? I'm talking about Georgia, Pennsylvania, yet that same system that you and I know so much about has been allowed to flourish in places like Arizona. And I'll give you a concrete example. There was a big discussion over early voting. You know, early voting was something that was pushed by many folks out there. I didn't push it, and I think this is because I'm not an expert in narrative as much as I am in the truth. And what do I mean by that? Historically, we've been told that Democrats prefer early voting over Republicans. And that's your first narrative. And that narrative was seeded in the lead up to 2020. Now, my election team, when we started auditing and looking at the books, especially in New Mexico, we looked at 30 years worth of data on whether that's technically true, meaning do Democrats indeed enjoy the method of voting that is early voting more so than Republicans? And we found that that's not true. It's technically inaccurate. They rely on it by probably a 1 percentage point advantage over Republicans. And so right out the gate, something was being foisted on the American people to basically plant the seed to allow a cheat to take place in the months afterward. And so now you've got the emergence of other people, whether it's Turning Point, Scott Press, or what have you, that are wanting to negate this narrative that's not actually based in the truth. And it presents all kinds of questions, right? So, but for whatever reason, the metrics that were allowed to be reported out on TV and otherwise showed that Republicans made significant gains during early voting. And so what I'm here to tell you and many others is that the system architecture, if they wanted to, they could have inflated the voter registration. They could have created mail-in ballots out of thin air. Um, what I don't have an answer for you is why it didn't succeed. Why didn't the Democrats and the radical left take hold of that infrastructure and do what they did in 2024? Because there's certainly the opportunity. We certainly haven't reformed our elections to get rid of these defective processes and products. And so it's left me in kind of this conundrum. Okay, like, look, I still see clearly. I know that these machines are a problem. I know that the capability of doing everything that they're doing in Arizona right now could have taken place in Georgia. What I don't have for you is an answer as to why. And so as we navigate through what's going on in Arizona, here's what you need to know. You've got all-inclusive integrated software that's based in the cloud that ties a voter ID number to a ballot. And that ballot can be printed out of thin air. In fact, it's what's happening in Arizona is Runback is able to just count up or print up tens of thousands of ballots. And they find their way into these counting centers where we're finding tens of thousands of votes without eyes actually being fixed on the ballot, being counted in favor of the opposition to Carrie Lake. We're seeing the same thing in Michigan. Even Alex Jones has had some reports about this phenomenon of glitches, and it's starting to hit the mainstream legacy media. And so all of the problems that you've warned about, they are materially present, and we're seeing them. So I know that I've just shared with you a lot of kind of the things that I'm struggling through and some of my insights, but it's just very, very confusing. And I would rather get back to a system that's crystal clear.
I absolutely agree. And I'm still working, through it all. And as we look at the different states, but you also, let's take Pennsylvania, for example. There was significantly less mail-in ballots this year, right? And now they're busy trying to recall the Pennsylvania Senate race. So it's not over there when we're talking about the Senate seat. But as far as just overall the election, there were so many less, tens of thousands less mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania this time around.
Yeah, so that's probably a healthy byproduct of having more poll watchers that were able to at least have eyes on facilities. I still think you had elegant solutions to cheat and subvert that, as was the case with Jesse Morgan 4 years ago. This is a guy that was a subcontractor for the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah.
Had 24 huge boxes of pre-filled ballots that he transported from New York to Pennsylvania. And perhaps Team Evil was more ill at ease because of the awareness of the American people. I think if anything's changed that's helped us is not so much an improvement in the infrastructure itself with the corrupt administrators. It's just that the knowledge base of grassroots activists, the so-called election denying elite, they're watching everything, and they weren't as likely to be bullied and sent home. I mean, that's still the case in some locations where perhaps they couldn't carry it out. So yeah, we got to praise God for the victories that we got in Pennsylvania for sure.
But they're still doing it for the Senate and the House seats. So it can still be done because we're currently watching them when they say these ballots show up out of nowhere, right? As we saw in Pima and Yuma counties in Arizona, how do they justify them? Where do they say they're even coming from?
Yeah, well, they're able to make real-time decisions based on a couple factors. One, each of the states uses an integrated software that allows you to track absentee ballots and mail-in ballots. And so if you've got a long period for early voting, that 3-week period, you can more or less determine the delta of what you need to overcome come election day. And if it's a really close race, you can use the electronic poll books, which gives you a real-time tally of people that have checked in. And if you're a registered Republican, chances are you're voting for Republicans, and vice versa. So it's with the use of these other machines that we don't talk about quite as much that it allows you to just, okay, look, I see what the delta is. I know what we have to overcome if I'm Ruben Gallego's campaign manager. And all of this stuff is part of a suite of products that's centralized. So in Arizona, I believe they use total vote. Now, they might throw out a
Hmm.
customizable term of art, but it's total vote, just like we use in New Mexico. And it really allows you to associate that voter ID with a person, whether or not they vote or not, it's immaterial. They can generate a ballot that's tied to the voter ID. And when you've got no meaningful chain of custody and you've got drop boxes, you can pull votes from a place in Yuma. You can pull a place from Pima. It doesn't matter. I mean, you can really on statewide races, you can pull it from any unobserved drop box
Yeah.
and take a wrecking ball to the elections.
Look, things have not changed, right? There was some change in Pennsylvania and Georgia and, maybe a couple other states based on grassroots efforts, but not enough to secure the election. But they're already talking about using the early voting tactic for the midterms on the Republican side. So I fear that there is going to be no accountability, even though Donald Trump has said that, we need to clean it up, same day voting. Do you think, and we only have about 30 seconds, there will actually be any reform in getting rid of the machines and going to one day voting by 2020,
Well,
the next election, 2028?
if Trump is a man of his word, and I believe he is, I think there is hope. I think through
Okay.
HAVA, you can impose all kinds of things through federal legislation. But yeah, it's disconcerting to see that narrative that let's reinforce early voting instead of getting rid of it.
I agree. We're going to be talking a lot more about this in the future, David Clements, because I know both of us are not going to let up on it. Thank you so much. It's good to see you for this postmortem.
Good to see you. Thank you, Emerald.